Let's look at a couple of announcements as we begin. Homework 2 was submitted just now, and I hope that you found the in-class exercise made it relatively straightforward to do that assignment. It should just be a seamless transition most times. But in the future, there may be one or two problems where it seems unfamiliar, and that's just so that you get the practice of trying to figure out something complicated that you haven't seen before. You know, when you graduate from the university and become professional engineers, that's going to be every day on the job is something new that you've never seen before, and you're going to have to figure out an unfamiliar challenge. And so we try and gradually start giving you the appetite of problems like that. But for the most part, there will be a good connection between the in-class exercises and the assignments. Okay, as you can see on the screen there, there's a quiz that we're going to have on Thursday the 17th. That's Thursday of this week. And it's going to include all of the material in the course, including Tuesday's class. And so we'll do that at the beginning of the lecture. It'll probably take about 10 minutes for us to do the quiz. It's a very quick, small quiz. You don't need to bring any notes. In fact, the quiz will be a closed note. All you should bring is a calculator and a pencil or a pen. You can't use your mobile phone during a quiz. It has to be an actual calculator, or you can just use your brain. All right? Homework number 3, which you've collected off of the table there, it's going to be due on Sunday the 27th, and so that's after the Eid break. And it's covering cash flow, compounding, and some other things that we're going to get to later in the week. Any questions off of the announcements for upcoming events? We're continuing our discussion of content for cash flows, and we're getting into a subject, economic equivalence. So I hope everyone has purchased the textbook by now. They had plenty of copies over at the bookstore last time that I checked. And I hope that what you're doing is taking a look at these book chapters. You know, the lecture really isn't enough. Just listening to me talk is not enough to learn the material. If you want an A or a B, it's not enough just to sit and listen. If you want an A or a B, you also have to read. So just good advice about to reinforce your learning. Economic equivalence is a big part of what we're going to be covering today. And in the in-class exercise, we're going to be comparing the value of money in the future to the value of money now. And so the definition of economic equivalence is that if you take into effect the interest rate or the payments that you're having to make in order to borrow money from a bank or from bonds, and the fact that, remember, we've said that because of inflation, money is always less valuable in the future than it is now. And so economic equivalence is trying to find out how much money in today's dollars some future amount is either worth or is going to cost. And so remember, we were talking about the Consumer Price Index here in the Emirates, and how in 2007 they set the baseline of costs at 100. And nowadays the costs are, I think it said in that report, maybe 142 is the number. But things are more expensive than they used to be. And so economic equivalence is doing an analysis to find out in the future if you're buying rebar or concrete. Let's say you have a job that is going to take several years to construct, like a large skyscraper, and you have to do all of your cost estimates. You have to make some allowance for how the value of things changes over time. And we're going to do some of the calculations today. In the homework that you just turned in, the last couple of problems, you didn't actually have to do any calculations. You were just assigning either P, A, F. You're just reading the word problem and finding out what amount goes with which variable. Now, in economic equivalence, you're actually using that information to do some calculations. And so you're finding some value of P, for example, which means the present money, and maybe you're converting it into a future amount using calculations that take into account the interest rate and how long in the future. Now, obviously, the bigger the interest rate, the more difference there's going to be between a future amount and a present amount. Just like if you put money into a bank, nowadays the interest rates are very low, so there isn't a huge difference between the money you put into the bank now and the money that you'll withdraw in the future. The bigger the interest rate, the larger that difference becomes, and also the longer the time it sits in the bank, the bigger the difference between the present and the future amounts. Here's a cash flow diagram that just illustrates that concept of equivalence. And so if you put some money now into an account, remember down means from your perspective losing money. It could be a deposit or a payment. It's a cash outflow is what we've said. So if you have a cash outflow of $100 now and are making 10% per year, then after 1 year that outflow to the bank maybe is worth a withdrawal of $110. Now sometimes it's easy to get confused about which direction things should go. And so pay really close attention. It may not be until the last thing that you see, the very last sentence in the assignment where it says, do this cash flow diagram from the bank's perspective. And so everything may make you think this is from the person's perspective, but at the end it flips it. So be very cautious about being sure you know which perspective you're supposed to be doing that cash flow diagram from. Any questions about this so far? It's a little bit of review. All right, the in-class exercise we're doing today, especially the second problem, is a little bit tricky because it has a few different steps. So I'm going to suggest we do the same thing of getting into groups of 2, maybe 3 at most. Problem 1 is a warm-up. You've seen problem 1 before. You want to receive 95,000 dirhams next year from an account that offers 9%. How much should you deposit today? So that's kind of a refresher. But then take a look at problem 2 with your partner and start to try and understand what it's asking. And then I'll break in after a few minutes and give you an idea of some strategy that you can cover. All right, so go ahead and get started on that. Okay, I know some of you are already moving on to the third problem, but let's take a look at the first 2 just to make sure that there's no questions that we don't need to address. Okay, the first one was kind of a refresher, just to remind you of the idea that 1.09, in this case it's the principal combined with the interest, times some unknown value is equal to the amount in the future. And so you were trying to find out what was the present amount before the interest was added in. Okay, 87,155. That one was relatively straightforward, but I saw a lot of different ways to solve number 2, and that's good. It's not like there's ever only one idea for how to solve these. There's different ways to think of it. And if you get the final answer of 56,570, that's good. So my idea here was that you're taking the money from one time to the other. So you're taking the money in year 0 and converting it into how much is it worth in year 1. And you have to use the interest to find out how much is it worth in year 1. And so the 12,500 times 1.05, that tells you in year 1 that 12,500 from year 0 is now worth 13,125. And so then you combine that with the amount you receive in year 1, which is 12,500. And now in year 1, that total amount that you owe the bank, or whoever you're borrowing the money from, is 25,625. And then that whole amount has to be carried into year 2. So you're converting it into the value in year 2 by multiplying it again by the interest rate, 1.05. So that combines the principal and the interest. But then you receive another 12,500. And so it's just sort of this cumulative process. Now, I got a good question. That is, how come you don't add another 12,500 in year 4? Yeah, it's because in year 4, you're only making a payment. You're not withdrawing. You're not receiving money in year 4. You're only paying it. And so if you count the number of arrows on the cash flow diagram, there were 4 arrows. And that means that in our solution, we should have kept track of 4 times receiving 12,500. And so it's a process of always owing a little bit more. Now let me show you in Excel. I haven't I haven't set this up before. I'm just going to be sort of trying it for the first time right now. Let's see if we could get a similar solution using Excel. We're going to have the year, amount received, and then we'll make a column of total value. Okay, we have year 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we receive 12,500 each time, 4 times. Okay, and then we don't receive any amount there. And so in year 0, all I owe so far is this. Okay, now what should I do for this cell? Are there any Excel gurus, people who really love Excel and use it a lot? Any suggestions on how I find out the total amount that I owe at the end of the first year? Okay? It's going to be the previous amount times 1.05 plus the amount I got this year. Okay? And 25,625, let's see if that's the same thing. 25,625. Okay, so far so good. And the beautiful thing about Excel is that once you type a formula, you don't have to type it over and over again. You can just drag it down. I think many of you have already seen the feature where here in the corner, if you just drag it down, so 39,406, let's see if that matches. 39,406, good. Okay, well, we're on a roll. Let's try again. 53,876. 53,876. So what it's doing is it's saying you owed this amount before. This is how much you used to owe last year. Now you owe me a little bit more even on that. And you owe me from how much I just gave you. And so now in year 4, it's just only going to have last year's amount being compounded. You don't receive any new. So 56,570.39. Let's see. 56,570.39. All right. Excel's beautiful, right? If I was stranded on a desert island, I'd want some water, some food, and Microsoft Excel. Microsoft Excel would be the entertainment. All right. That's how much I love it. All right. So I didn't want to interrupt too much, but that concludes 1 and 2, and you still have some time for 3. The basic idea on number 3 is you need the fuel in the future. So you can either buy it now and store it, or take the total cost of how much it takes to buy now, invest that amount, and then hopefully you'll have enough to buy it. Maybe you'll have something left over. If you do have something left over, try and calculate how much money left over you're having. All right, so go ahead and finish up number 3. Okay. The question is asking, should you buy the fuel now and store it, or should you buy the fuel in the future by investing your money now? And you just compare the two alternatives. If you buy it now, it will cost the fuel price plus the storage fee. Are fuel prices high right now or low? Depends on how you look at it, because in the Emirates, they just sort of started changing the fuel price you pay at the pump, right? Every month now it's changing. And the first time when they made the change, it was higher than it was before, right? But the oil price, like the world market oil price, right now is below $50 per barrel. Back in 2007, it was up around $140 per barrel. So if you look at the world market, the price of oil is very low. But we sort of feel the prices here in the UAE because the fuel subsidies are less than they previously were. So right now, fuel prices, relatively speaking, are low. So this is similar to what we're facing in the real world is similar to this example. If you're running a business, then you know you're always going to be using fuel in the future. There's an airline in the United States called Southwest Airlines. And a few years ago, they paid money to an oil company. They did something that's called hedging. And Southwest Airlines was worried that fuel prices was going to go up. And so they paid an oil company a fixed amount now to receive lower prices in the future. They were the only airline that did that. None of the other airlines, maybe they weren't worried about it, maybe they didn't think the prices were going to go up, but it turned out the prices went up a lot, and Southwest Airlines, they made so much money. They were the only profitable airline in the United States for a lot of years just because they had made the right bet on whether fuel prices were going up. They had invested a little bit extra to get a discount in the future. And that brings up kind of a weakness in problems like this. Okay, this problem statement, it's not realistic. In 3 years, the price is expected to be 2.65 per liter. Who can predict what the fuel price is going to be in 3 years? We don't even know what the fuel price will be for October, right? They announce it at the end of the month, and it's a surprise for all of us. And so in all of the problems we're going to be working over the next few days, it will say a specific amount, but what in your mind you have to remember is that's just an estimate. And so the quality of your analysis is only as good as the quality of your estimate. And so anytime you see a cash flow diagram, you should ask yourself, really, is a new piece of equipment going to generate 10,000 dirhams per year? Or if there's a problem where at the end of a certain amount of years they're selling the equipment. Do you remember the in-class exercise from Thursday where a business owner is buying a machine, is using it for some years, and then is selling it? Selling it for 50,000 dirhams at the end of the 6th year. Well, what guarantee is it that you're going to receive that amount for a used piece of equipment in 6 years? So you should always be very skeptical when people tell you how much something will cost in the future or what the value of something will be in the future, because sometimes people will rearrange a cash flow diagram to make it look favorable to whatever they're trying to argue. If someone is trying to sell you equipment, they'll say, if you buy my equipment, this will be your cash flow diagram. They'll say, if you buy my equipment today for 100,000, then you're going to have increased profits in the future for many years to come. And so you should be skeptical, like they're a fortune teller and a product salesman at the same time. You know, how can they know what the future really will be? So I just wanted to remind you of that point because it'll come up again and again through this semester. Now, on Thursday, we were a little bit rushed and I accidentally kept you late. I don't like to keep you late. I want you to get to your next class on time. So we're going to finish early today. But before we let go, let's just take one final look at these announcements that we're having a quiz on Thursday. So the way to prepare for that, hopefully you're keeping the in-class exercises because it's a good resource for you to study. It's helpful when you're doing the homework. So the way to prepare for the quiz is review the textbook, review the in-class exercises, and review what you did on the homework assignment. And everything should be smooth for you. And then the next homework assignment, I'm not going to collect homework 3 until after we get back from the Eid vacation, so on the 27th. All right, that's it for today. I'll see you on Tuesday.